Right, folks, welcome back to Eat Sleep Box and Repeat. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. We're talking AJ Usyk 2 here today, and specifically the sort of implications post-fight, regardless who the winner is on the heavyweight division, potentials for an undisputed fight, where does the winner go, where does the loser go, all that sort of stuff. Pleasure to be joined by Dan and Owen. How are we doing, boys?
Yeah, all good. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for joining us today for this chat. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, all good here as well, and looking forward to chatting about AJ Usyk again.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to keep this to like a sort of manageable time because it's just such an intriguing fight and the sort of potential, aftermath of it. So interesting to talk about. But in the interest of time, we'll get sort of straight into it. First scenario, I want to sort of discuss if it's repeat rather than revenge, and which would the bookmakers anyway believe to be the most likely outcome. And Alexander Usyk beats AJ again. I'll come to you first, Owen. Where do you reckon that leaves the sort of heavyweight division and what we're sort of most likely to see next? Obviously, the one we would all want to see, regardless of the winner, is the Tyson Fury undisputed fight. He's technically retired. I'm not sure how much most people believe that, but where do you think that leaves us? I'm not going to ask you for a prediction if you think that will happen, but where do you think that leaves us if Usyk successful over AJ again?
It depends who's successful, really. I think either fighter who wins, it's got to be a unification sort of thing. It's got to be, if Fury, like we say, I personally don't think he's retired. I think half of the boxing world, probably 95% of the boxing world, don't think he's retired because it's Tyson Fury. So I think the winner has to fight for the WBC belt as well, whether that's vacant, whether it's Fury, whether it's a mandatory. They do have to fight. The way I think it goes, if Usyk wins, I think the Fury fight's made, and again, if Joshua wins, the Fury fight's made. However, where they go and the way it leaves the boxing world, if Usyk loses, he was the cruiserweight king. He's not expected to be the heavyweight king realistically. He's quite a small heavyweight still. So I think if he loses, it's not the end of the world. Whereas I think if Joshua loses, the state of the heavyweight division will be in a bit of disarray because no one knows if Fury's retired. No one knows if Wilder's properly retired. Joshua will be back to square one, essentially. No one knows what Dylan White's doing. Pulev just lost to Derek Chisora. So I do think if Usyk wins, I do think as good as Usyk is, it leaves the heavyweights in a bit of a state of disarray.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Wilder there, sort of the forgotten man. In a way, you forget he would have been regarded as like one of the top two. I think it's the rumours he's come back to fight Helena, so that's another interesting heavyweight to throw into that whole sort of mix. Just come to you with that same question, Dan, mate. Would you agree with Owen that we'll see Usyk Fury for that sort of all that on all the belts, the sort of most coveted fight in boxing if Usyk is successful?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as I said, even though Fury's had all the belts, if you want to say, across his career, I think that he classes himself as the best fighter in this generation, which you can't really argue with him currently with obviously his record. He's undefeated. But yeah, for his legacy, I think he has to be physically called the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. We haven't had one since Lennox Lewis last had the undisputed title. And I think if he was retired, being how big this rematch is with Joshua and Usyk, I reckon the WBC would have wanted that belt potentially on the line in this fight to make this the undisputed fight if Fury was retired, because then you would have had that undisputed heavyweight champion happening. But I don't think he's retired, as Owen said. Only person I think he thinks he's retired now and again is Tyson at the moment, because he's playing us well. He's a showman, he's a businessman, and to a degree, and to me, he's just an all-out fighting man, really. So I don't think there's anything stopping him. If you ask anybody close to him, is he retired? They say no, they don't think he is. Paris has even said the only fight that will come out is the undisputed fight. Regarding the heavyweight division, I think, as Owen said, yeah, it'll take it completely into disarray if Usyk gets the win, which a lot of people think he potentially could do, because a lot of fighters, maybe like Chisora, for example, he took Usyk very close in his early heavyweight 8 days. A lot of people potentially said they potentially got a draw or a win against him. Where does that leave Chisora? A lot of the heavyweights who think he's a lot lighter, like Owen said, potentially may think that they've got a shot. If you put him in against Wilder, it could be a totally different story, because that man can punch and he can knock out a horse at times, as he's shown over his career. But Wilder's fight, that's apparently according to rumours, potentially off as well at the moment. Nobody knows why. There was something mentioned today that the Wilder fight could be delayed. But if Joshua wins, I just think that the only fight there is the all British fight, whether it's for free, as we're hearing, free to air, free to go in, fight for free. Who knows? But I think that fight, as Owen said, is already made. To be honest with you, I think it's the biggest fight in boxing. Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, they've spoken about it for ages. The biggest fight in the heavyweight division for a long time, and I think it'll just draw the biggest crowds, the biggest box office in I don't know how long. I just think it's massive.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna stick my neck out here and disagree with you boys that I think if Usyk wins, I don't think Fury will fight him. I think Fury's been saying, and even Frank Warren's been saying, "Oh, we're waiting, we're teasing this announcement, and the only person he's speaking about in this fight is AJ. I think if AJ wins, Fury 100% fights him, but he doesn't mention Alexander Usyk's name. He called him a blown up middleweight once, and that was it. And he said before, like a couple of years ago, thinking around the time of the first Wilder rematch, that he was saying that the style to beat him is small, in and out. I mean, you remember the Steve Cunningham fight, and obviously Fury's an improved fighter now, but Cunningham back then gave him fits, and he was obviously a cruiserweight champion as well. And Usyk's a completely different stratosphere of fighter to Steve Cunningham. I'm not saying necessarily Fury thinks Usyk will beat him, but I think he's just really sort of pinning obviously the financial side of the AJ fight so much more as well, and I think he sees the AJ fight as an easy fight, to be honest. But anyway, I'll not accuse him anymore before I've had leaf Fury fans.
But going on what you said, I know Eddie Earn likes to throw a bit few spanners in the works, but he said it himself, and he said that the Usyk fight was made allegedly for Fury, and Joshua would have stepped aside, etc. But then apparently he wanted a warm-up fight, etc. before Usyk. So that does, I suppose, go with what you're saying, Dan. Is that potentially it? Does he want? Or is there something there that he thinks could potentially trouble him? But if he's a blown-up middleweight like he is, and then Tyson's fusing that Kronk style, potentially he could just steamroll him if he was that confident. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think Fury just doesn't know it's a really tough fight. But just sort of the flip side of what we were talking about, if Usyk does win, we were saying about where that leaves the division and the potential for that undisputed fight with Fury. Where does that leave Anthony Joshua? Because I think a lot of people, if you asked them a month or two ago, if Josh has beat the game, certainly the casual fan would say, "Oh, he's done, he's finished, X, Y, and Z." But he signed this new £100 million long-term deal with his own, which would lead you to believe that even if he is beat, he's not going anywhere for the foreseeable future. They'll want to, recoup as much as they can on him. So I'll come to you first on this one, Dan. If Anthony Joshua loses and, we assume he does continue boxing, what does the next couple of years look like for him, do you think?
Well, as I don't think that he could retire. Do you mean he's made a lot of money? He's done a lot in the sport that people didn't expect him to do. Do you mean you've got to give it to him? His resume is good on paper. He hasn't turned down any fights as such. He's never really made excuses. People have made excuses for him, but you've never really heard them from him. There's potential fights out there. The Fury fight, going off that, even if Fury doesn't even have the titles, there's massive money still in that fight for him, and realistically, that fight makes sense. You've got the White rematch that everyone's been talking about since it happened back in his early career, because a lot of people said potentially if White's shoulder didn't go when he had Joshua up against the rope, so that could have been a totally different story. You've got the Wilder fight that's been being called for a while. Ruiz is the forgotten man at the minute. He's making his comeback. He's fighting Luis Ortiz. He's allegedly in the best shape he's ever been in, Ruiz. So he's looking to make a tilt back. So potentially that sort of fight that could happen. So there's still big fights out there, but it's whether he's got the drive and determination, as Owen said earlier on, that he's back to the start technically, whether he's got that drive and determination to rebuild and go after them heavyweight titles again. Because there's only, like I said, it's either going to be the undisputed fight or the titles are going to be splintered everywhere again, or just throw something in the work. Potentially we could set up a World Series boxing heavyweight title tournament that will bring everything back together, and it'll literally be the best fighting the best then. But somebody's got to have deep pockets to put that on.
Right, mate, you're not joking there. Some cracking fights you mentioned there. I like don't really understand the view of like some people that AJ needs to like pack it in if he's beat here again. Like just because you're not like number one in the division doesn't mean like you can't leave yourself a great legacy by having like great fights. Like we want to see as many of these top heavyweights fighting each other as possible, even you ones from like 3 to 8 or like the sort of fringe top 10 ones. But just come to you in the same thing. Owen, what's next for AJ if he's beat?
I don't have to say I've been guilty myself of jumping the gun. Oh, AJ's done if he loses, but AJ's not done. Like you say, signed the 5-fight deal. He's worth too much money to be done. Whilst he wants to continue boxing, and let's be honest, they're not the zone, Matchroom, Eddie Hearn. They're not stupid. There'll be contractual obligations within that contract that he has to see out that contract, or he'll have to, I'd imagine, buy himself out, something like that. So AJ's going nowhere. Now, I think he's not done in terms of boxing. I think for the top level, he's not going to get the Fury fight without the belts. He's not getting the Usyk fight again. He's got to take a step down, take a step backwards, one step back to go 2 steps forward. I think you've got so many up and coming. Well, some of them aren't necessarily age wise, like Joe Joyce is still technically up and coming, but you've got Joe Joyce, you've got Hrgovic, you've got Zhang, you've got Martin Bakole. There's so many fights out there, these unbeaten fighters that haven't been tested. So why not test them with AJ? Let's see how good they are. Then if, say, Hrgovic for example, gets the AJ fight and bums him out, then it's really like, where does AJ go from here sort of thing. So I don't think he's done. I think there's some brilliant fights still out there for him. There's the White rematch that'll do heavy numbers again. It's just a case of what's AJ's mentality. Is he going to accept them fights, or is he going to sit around? Is he going to wait for a Wilder? But like we say, Wilder's been knocked off his perch and he's fighting Hellenius. So AJ would have to do the same, take a warm-up fight in a sense, and then go in. Or if he's confident and comfortable in his ability, why not take on one of these unbeaten fighters? I mean, you've even got people like Caballero, who's still unbeaten, hasn't really fought anyone. So why not put him in with someone like AJ? So I do think a lot of it will depend on his mindset and how he wants to move forward. But he's absolutely not done. He's worth too much money, for one. He's still entertaining. If he can get that fire back inside of him, for example, punches like the Zambano love punch. If we can get that AJ where he's just not afraid of what's coming back, even Charles Martin, the world title fight, just the combinations where it's, I'm not bothered what you're going to throw against me. I'm just coming at you. If we can get that AJ back, brilliant. So he's definitely not done. I think he will fulfill the 5 fights. It's just who he goes up against is a question. There's a lot of unbeaten boxers coming through, and the Joe Joyce fight is definitely one I can see, because Joyce is just hovering around that sort of, he's past gatekeeper level, I think, but he's just hovering around waiting for the big call out, for the big name. And once he gets it, we'll see what happens.
It's just whether AJ's got as you said, the desire to drop to that level, because going back to when he had his first loss against Ruiz, everybody wanted him to take that warm-up fight then to put the wrongs right, etc. And he was like, no, I'm not stepping down that level. I'm coming straight back my belt. Stuff. It's just whether he's got that drive and determination. He's going to have to, like you said, probably there's contractual obligations within that contract, but it's whether he's got that drive and determination to step down to that level. Because potentially, I know you've mentioned Joe Joyce and stuff. If he wants a shot back at his titles, one way of doing it is it may not happen, but Daniel Dubois got the WBA regular heavyweight title. To me, he could take on that fight, win that regular heavyweight title, puts him straight back in a mandatory position for his title shot, then being that if you become the WBA mandatory, that's a route. Whether that fight will happen, I don't know. But I think it's spot on, really, what you said, Owen. It's like you said, it's whether he's got that mindset to get back down there.
Yeah.
I think as low as you would see him drop, that you chat about a step down, would be someone like Dubois, to be honest. I don't think you'll see AJ fight like a Tom Schwartz or anything like that. I would love to see him personally try and build towards the Wilder fight. I think if that had been made like 2016, 2017, around that time, like that would have been just an absolute monster fight. Like 2 of them at the time, like 100% 1 and 2 in the division. Still arguably the 2 biggest punchers in the division. I think people's perceptions of that fight probably have changed over the outcome. I think AJ would have been a strong favourite if you were chatting around that time, whereas I think a lot of people now would lean towards Wilder knocking him out. But I still think that's, you know, such a good fight. As you sort of said, Owen, like Wilder's having that hilarious fight. AJ would need something similar. That could be against a Dubois, you know, for the WBA title. Could even be against the Joyce. That's not, again, cracking fight you mentioned, but we could sit here and wax lyrical about these fights all day, boys, but people are going to start turning off. So we'll wrap it up there. Thanks a million for both coming on. It was a really good chat. Really enjoyed it. Any other final points you want to make before we wrap it up?
Yeah, just quickly, someone we forgot is Otto Wallin. He won that potentially took Fury. A lot of people think they potentially could have beaten Fury. I know that cut was involved, but he's ready for that world title shot as well. So that's potentially someone that Joshua could step down and have that fight, because he's literally sitting there waiting as the others are as well, waiting for that shot, waiting for that opportunity. So that's another potential one we could throw in the ring. And you've got Joseph Parker, who's looking for a big fight as well. So that rematch is potentially there as well.
So many names, honestly, going all day, even like someone like Hugh Fury, but we'll not start again or we won't stop. Thanks again. As I say, I really enjoyed it. Thanks everyone who watched. Like, comment, subscribe, all that, and catch you on the Eat Sleep Box Repeat YouTube channel sometime soon. Cheers.
Cheers, Dan. Thanks.
Thank you.